Indian political parties have always wooed their voters with various allurements, and these are, free gifts, freebies, cash incentives, and even liquor. But of late, these freebies have taken on gigantic proportions. They're literally bursting the banks of state finances. And we are asking this question: how long can states sustain this new culture of freebienomics? Joining me to discuss this today are Yatish Rajawat, CEO, Center for Innovation in Public Policy, and my colleague Gulam Jeelani. Welcome to the News9 Plus Show, gentlemen. Yatish, I want to start by asking you, how do freebies and subsidies of the kind that we have seen in the last couple of months, which are being promised by state governments at the elections, how are they impacting on state fiscal health?
Sandeep, the issue is that most states are almost veering towards bankruptcy. Most states have, take a state like Punjab, their revenue to interest ratio is something like 22%. That means that 20% of their revenue is actually going into paying interest on debt because they don't have sufficient revenue. They are borrowing to meet their existing requirement. So if a state is, if this was a normal household budget and the household was paying 20-25% as interest payment, then there is something fundamentally wrong with managing finance in that household, and therefore in these states. These states are not capable of meeting their operational requirements, in the sense that in some cases, like in case of Punjab and Tamil Nadu, they actually have to borrow every year to meet the salary of their temporary workers.
Right.
And this is a serious concern. Now, in this environment, if you decide to kind of give a something kind like the old pension scheme, which was where this freebies topic actually started, when the states started reverting back to the OPS, you are actually borrowing to pay pension to people who've already left your government,
Right.
And hence the burden of both interest and debt actually increases for the state going forward.
Right.
So there is actually there is very little fiscal room left for the state to actually do anything else. So they keep borrowing and they keep paying out these incentives, or these, I don't like the word freebies too much, because it kind of clubs everything that a state does on the welfare side as something that is given away free. But these are fiscally irresponsible decisions that states are taking, and doing just because there is a political incentive to do this.
Right. In fact, Gulam, I want to bring you in on this, that the story that you just did on sticker shock, how they are a recipe for disaster. Can freebies, as Yatish was saying, can they be a substitute for public welfare? And how do you tell the difference when it's a freebie is a freebie and when it's public welfare?
See, Sandeep, the freebie is an old thing. It's been there since 1960s when, the then Tamil Nadu Chief Minister started that, 4.5 kg rice for 1 rupee. It's been there for decades. Now it has grown to such a level that it has become a burden on the states.
Right.
As you rightly said, for some, there is a public welfare thing that the government is supposed to do. So if you talk about public welfare, it means access to education, access to healthcare, access to good schools, access to good hospitals, access to roads and other things, which are mandated for the government. But when it comes to freebies, it mainly covers free doles.
Right.
For example, you saw in the recent elections, some political parties are giving free scooties.
Right.
Some political parties we have seen in the past have given pressure cookers.
Yes.
Some have given sardines. Even liquor was one of the freebie, mostly in South, which we saw. So there's a basic difference between a freebie and a public welfare thing. We have none other than RBI governor, former RBI governor saying it cannot be a substitute for public welfare.
Right.
If you look at the states, as our guest was saying, look at Karnataka, where Congress won the election last year, and on the promise of 5 guarantees.
Yes.
There is not a proper study, but one study by SBI says it can amount to 60,000 crores,
Right.
which is huge. Look at Rajasthan. Congress lost the election recently.
Yeah.
In Rajasthan, there were 9 schemes. There's a PRS legislative study which says that the 9 schemes were around 37,000 crores, which is 1/3 of the tax and non-tax revenue of the state.
Right.
If you look at over the years, it's been there, as I said earlier, but the debate is now, because last year we saw Prime Minister Modi saying that revenues are dangerous.
That's right. Yeah. Revenues are,
are dangerous for the democracy, for developing nations. We have Supreme Court hearing a case. We have none other than former Election Commissioner O.P. Rawat flagging the freebies. We have, as the guest was saying, you look at free healthcare, free education, free roads, but look at OPS.
Yes.
Raghuram Rajan, he wrote a book. He was giving an interview, I think 2 weeks ago, in which he said OPS will eventually lead to burden on the state.
Yes,
etc.
yes.
If you look at budget estimates of 2024, there are at least 11 states which are deficit, which have deficit revenue, which are revenue deficit. So it gives a picture that freebies are ultimately, they are creating a fiscal problem for the states, and eventually they have to borrow money from the center.
Right.
And
Yatish, when does a freebie stop being a freebie and cross the line and become public welfare? Because a lot of people back in the day questioned this midday meal scheme. It was said to be a freebie, it's a SOP, but now, as we know, 4 decades later, it's transformed the lives of so many school children, and especially women in Tamil Nadu were empowered because of that.
The best way to understand the difference between a public welfare program and a freebie is the amount of time does it take is it a consumable, or is it used for consumption, or is it used for some kind of long-term gain for public good.
Right.
So if you take a case of the midday meal, the objective of the meal was not to feed the children. The objective of the meal was to attract students into the school.
Absolutely.
During lunchtime, so that that became the incentive for the parent to send this child to school, and they also got a meal there.
Yes.
This was basically done to counter the practice of putting the child to work or at home or not sending him to school. So the objective was not feeding or giving rice away or giving dal away,
right,
or so that is a short-term measure. It does not do anything else but leads to immediate consumption by that household.
Right.
In case of, when we say that this is a freebie and this is not, like for instance, in the case of the pension scheme, what we are saying that there is a pensioner who was earlier getting X amount of money, and we shifted that burden because it is a burden that is continuous and long-term in nature. We shifted that burden to market in the sense that we created a corpus and we put all that pension burden onto that corpus. Now, if we revert back and we keep increasing his pay every time that there is a pay increase for the state government, we are increasing the burden on the state finances. So now it's not adding any value in the long term. It's just being given away because it will add votes to the political party that gives it, And this is now clearly reflected. If you look at the top 3 states, Bihar, Karnataka and Telangana, these are states in which the actual interest expenditure between financial year 19 to financial year 22 has gone up between 50% to 72%. And this has largely happened because these states have borrowed money to either give dal, rice or that kind of stuff to the people, or as your colleague was pointing out, they've given freebies like a swing machine or a washing machine. These giveaways do not really add anything to the economy. Like if you were to build a new school, why don't we call it as a freebie? Because basically that new school is an infrastructure, and children get educated and they become productive sources. So it is a productive expenditure. It's not a short-term expenditure which does not add anything to the economy. So that is the differentiation that most policymakers derive when they're defining whether this is just a revenue or this is actually public expenditure that is good for public and is long term in nature.
Right.
So that's the, I mean, that's the classical definition that you would like to draw between a freebie and a public welfare
Right.
expenditure.
But Yatish, you think it's actually going to get worse now? This competitive freebienomics between political parties and states, indeed, is it in the years ahead, given the pressures on political parties, is it going to intensify?
Yes, I mean, it's a given, because once this competition starts and this becomes a norm, political reality tells you that every political party will follow the same process. If somebody is giving a sewing machine, the other will give a washing machine plus a sewing machine.
Right.
So the competitive politics is such. The only way to prevent it is that the state's ability to borrow or to execute it is curtailed either by the central government or it is curtailed by the Reserve Bank of India. And if you see the pre-COVID years, the borrowing capacity of most states was curtailed. They were asked not to borrow. Most of their central funding was linked to the fact that they follow fiscal prudence, and it had led to a reduction in their debt and all. But due to COVID, both the central government opened up its basically limits for borrowing by states, and they have just gone hyper on borrowing, and this is fundamentally it doesn't add any long-term economic value, because the political party basically bankrupts the state government. And we've seen it in the case of Tamil Nadu, we're seeing it in West Bengal, we're seeing it in Kerala, we saw it in Madhya Pradesh also. The Madhya Pradesh government's borrowing suddenly jumped in the last 5-6 years. Even in Punjab, it just skyrocketed. And these are states which do not have, Punjab does not have any great economic growth or any great economic activity happening there. So it's a cycle which is vicious, and it is incestuous in the sense that the state will find it increasingly difficult to get out of it, even if there is a conservative government that comes back into power in these states.
Absolutely, and it's a cycle that's vicious, it's a cycle that's incestuous, as Yatish just mentioned. Thank you very much for your comments, Yatish and Gulam. That story of yours, you can watch our story Freebie Movement only on the News9 Plus app. Download and watch.